If you're deconstructing or dissecting or even just trying to figure faith out, here's a question that will help you on that journey. And it's not, is the Bible true or is there a God? In fact, oftentimes those questions are off-ramps to faith, not on-ramps to faith. The question is this: is Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John a reliable account of actual events? Because believe it or not, the Christian faith doesn't rise or fall on the accuracy of the 66 documents that we call the Bible. Instead, it rises and falls on a single individual, Jesus of Nazareth. And if just Matthew or Mark or Luke or John, one of the 4 biographies we have of Jesus' life, is reliable and it talks about actual events that happened, then it's game on. It's faith on. If you're a Jesus follower, your faith is not in vain. Run the intro. Here's why I think that's one of the most helpful and important questions for you if you're trying to figure faith out. Imagine for a minute that faith is kind of like a game of golf. When you play golf, there's so much to figure out. It's just like anything new, you're trying to figure out like, hey, should I put the ball in front of my stance, at the back of my stance? How do I pivot my hips? Should my stance be wide? Should it be narrow? And you're starting to think about all those things. And you can think about so many things that you actually forget to hit the ball. And I think the same is true when it comes to faith. You can have so many questions about faith. You can have so many questions about the Bible. The challenge becomes that we're not actually sure what ball we're trying to hit. And so eventually what ends up happening is we just swing and swing and swing. And we're not even sure if our questions are helping us. The reason you might not have ever asked a question like this is, well, honestly, because of people like me. Because Jesus followers have not done a great job of the way in which we talk about the Bible. Like if you grew up in church or you went to Sunday school, or maybe you went to a Christian school and you had a chapel, or maybe you just kind of heard about Bible stories through friends or through the media. Often what begins to happen is we hear these stories and we think, hey, there was a garden or there was a flood, or wasn't there a guy with a cloak or a little kid who took on a giant? And then Jesus comes along and we hear about Jesus and we go, oh, well, Jesus was in the Bible. And so we just lump Jesus in with all these Bible stories. But the truth is, the story of Jesus is not just another Bible story. In fact, the story of Jesus, without it, we wouldn't have a Bible. Here's a little timeline to let me explain what I mean by that. Do you want me to go down? So the timeline begins with an event, and this happened in the 1st century. The event is the resurrection of Jesus. And then very quickly after the event, a movement began. It was known as a Nazarene sect or the Way. It would eventually grow into what we call the church. And very quickly after the movement began, people began to document it. In fact, 4 of those biographies have survived antiquity. We know them as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I would argue that these began to be documented within 35 to 40 years of the event of the resurrection. It wasn't until the 4th century that those documents were collected into what we now refer to as the Bible. So where does that leave you? Well, I hope it gives you something to focus on as you deconstruct, dissect, or just figure out faith. And if you want to continue the conversation, continue it in the comments below, or simply click the Discover link, and we would love to have a conversation with you online or in person. You know what I still can't figure out, Pat? Why so many people haven't subscribed. Subscribe.
What's the percentage?
Subscribe, I don't know, it's like just a lot. Just hit the like button, subscribe, it's not that hard.